Well, welcome everyone. It's so lovely to see all of you in a room together. This is like really awesome. And we are here today to talk with you about capacity building. And we're going to do that by talking in very general terms and then very specific terms as well in terms of the offerings that we can provide to you as nonprofits working in this community. A couple spots up front if you need them. But I want to start by introducing the team so that you know who is here at the Community Foundation to help you in your journey through running your nonprofit organization and building your capacity. So I know most of the people in the room. My name is Cindy Hales. I'm the Vice President here at the Community Foundation for Community Investment, which pretty much means overseeing all of the grant making and the outreach and work with nonprofits in the community. So that is my role. And this is LaToya Turner. Hi. LaToya is our Community Investment Associate, who is a really integral part of the team in terms of the outreach in the community and also working on some of the different grant opportunities that we have available. And that's Tracy Russman, who, for anybody who's tried to apply for a grant from us and has lost their mind because of the database, this is the person, this is the magic behind the chaos. Tracy is our community investment administrator and so oversees our scholarship programs here, but also does all of our tech. So we are very grateful for that because you don't want me doing it. So that's the team here at the Community Fund, the Community Investment Team, and we are here to work with all of you in a variety of ways. But again, today we are specifically going to talk about capacity building. So I would venture to say that if you talk to 50 people in the room, and there's about 50 people here, and asked everybody their definition of capacity building, my guess is that everybody would give you a slightly different answer. And the truth of the matter is, if you visited one of the, I think, 78 community foundations in the state of Michigan and asked them, do you do capacity building and how do you define it? They're all going to define it differently too. So I'd like to tell you that there is one blanket approach to this. There is not. There's a variety. Seats up front, there's two of them here. There's one right here. There's a variety of ways that you can approach this work. And so our purpose today is to talk specifically about how we here at Capital Region Community Foundation do this work. So there's a lot of ways of defining this, but this is how I simplify it with folks, right? If you think about the work that you do,
Great job.
okay, sounds good. If you think about the work that you do in your organizations, a lot of your work is external, right? Out in the community, you're delivering services, you're delivering programs, you're helping people in the community, you're helping the environment, whatever your mission is, you are doing that work in the community. Capacity building allows you to be selfish and focus on the internal pieces of your organization. Right? What is it that your organization needs? Not what are the needs of the community? How are people, in need of services? What can we do to help youth? What can we do for the environment? The question is, what needs to be done in our organization internally in terms of strengthening our infrastructure, or as our CEO likes to say, the engine that makes you run, right? What are the things that you are going to do for yourself? So this is a great chance for you to focus strictly on your organization and the specific needs that you have. So that's the first thing to think about. If you're thinking about capacity building, ask yourself the question, is this something that we need to strengthen our organization internally? So, what does that mean? Well, again, the way we look at it, and we are not everybody, but for purposes of today, our approach is to say anything that you are going to work on as an organization that helps you to grow, helps you to be sustainable, or helps you to reimagine something within your organization. So that can be planning, right? Strategic planning, long-range planning. We're going to talk about some of these things in kind of greater detail. But it really is about creating, there's a seat right here for you if you like. Really helps you to think about what it is that your organization needs that will make you stronger, more sustainable, or help you to reimagine something within your organization. So I always feel like I'm going to be the bearer of bad news, like I'm delivering bad news here when I say this, but I want to be upfront about this. Capacity building is hard work. It takes lots of time, your time. How many people in here are staff? How many folks are board members? Oh, that is lovely. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for coming. That's great. Because it's important to know that capacity building isn't something that your executive director does, or that your executive director and your staff, however many folks that may be, does. It is something that you do collectively as a team of people, including your board. And so it is beyond critical that as you think about participating in some level of capacity building work with us, that you have all of your board engaged and committed to this idea. It just doesn't work otherwise. So part of what we're trying to encourage you all to do is not only think about what are the needs that you have within your organization, but what is the most practical way for us to meet those needs? And one of the things that we've done here at the Community Foundation over the last several months is have conversations about what are the offerings that we either currently provide or could provide to all of you to meet you where you're at in terms of your capacity building journey. So that's kind of the deep dive that we're going to do today for all of you, okay? And we're going to start by talking about the life cycle of a nonprofit. Exciting stuff, huh? Hoorah, right? It is, right? It is, because if you think about your organization as sort of a living, breathing thing, right? Then you have to think about it having stages or life cycles in the same way that we all do, right? And so at every stage of our lives, we have different needs, we have different desires, we have, different wants for our future. I can tell you, I think about my work and my days very differently at this stage of my life than I did in my 20s or 30s, right? The same thing with your organization, right? Depending on where you are in that cycle of your organization will dictate some of your needs in terms of capacity building and also dictate how we can be supportive for all of you. I should say, because I see some photos and frantic writing, let me just let you know that we're going to send you this infographic via email as a follow-up, so you'll have it, and then you can share it with your boards and whoever else you'd like to share it with. So that's kind of how we want to deep dive today, and we're going to let LaToya talk to you a little bit about the first couple of stages, and then I'll take the last two. So
thank you, Cindy. So as Cindy mentioned, we will be sending out this infographic so you don't have to jot down everything hastily. Also, there are photos being taken today, so please make sure there's a sign-in sheet on each row of tables. So just please acknowledge if you don't mind having your photo taken. So you just write yes or no on that. So.
Oh, maybe one more.
Make sure they go down one list. Okay, so we just want to get started about thinking those cycles that you go through as a nonprofit. In the beginning, you've gotten with a couple friends and you decided that you saw that there was a need in your community and you wanted to do something about it. Great. So what do? You go and you do your research and you start a nonprofit. So in the beginning stage as a startup, you formally have services that you provide and you're starting to get well received in the community. People are starting to hear about what you do. That's great. You're thinking about, okay, I'm paying out all this money to provide this service to people. In the early stages, a lot of times your funding is just coming from family and friends, right? So you really have to start thinking about what you're gonna do as far as your fundraising. And you're still operating on very limited funds. This is a great time to really start thinking about what your financials are gonna look like and start figuring out what your operating budget is gonna be. There's a lot of fundamental activities that need to go in when you're starting up these organizations, and something to think about. Your founding leader is still the leader of your organization, and you're kind of still defining your mission and making sure that it's something that people can understand. A lot of times there are organizations that create a mission that is so broad because they want to help the world, right? It's really nice to really focus in and hone in on what your mission is, because as a funder, we're looking to see, like, what exactly are you doing? Like, what exactly do you need this funding for? Yes, there's a lot of needs out there, but if you can hone in on what your mission is, it really helps those funders understand how they can support your mission. You want to start making sure that your branding and marketing materials are taking shape. So a lot of people use social media as a great avenue to really get their word out. Very basic way to start your branding and marketing. And then making sure that you set up a board and your governance structure. A lot of time as a startup, when I'm going out and reaching out to people in the community, we ask, like, who's on your board? A lot of times as a startup, you starting out with your family and friends, right? But is that exactly who you need on your board? Something to think about. What is the purpose of having a board? You know it's a requirement, but why? So we thought about this as we started talking to organizations, because this was a common theme that we saw amongst various organizations. And we're like, okay, I think we really need to talk to people about how we can support them at this phase. And so many times it just results in basic consultation and guidance, you know, just kind of knowing what those areas are and what it entails to really start your nonprofit and what you can do with that. Oftentimes we can connect you to other similar nonprofits, because collaboration is key. Collaboration is king, I should say. It's everything. You talk to some of the major organizations around the county, they're working with so many other nonprofits, and that's how they build their success. We also have talked about starting some workshops, because again, those basic nonprofit fundamentals is going to be key to having a really successful organization. If you can have a good start, if you can build on that momentum, that'll help you grow into your next phase. And then we are going to continue sharing external funding opportunities, because a lot of times in that early phase, because you're not as well known as some other organizations, or you just haven't been getting your mission out as well as others, it's harder to get that funding out, because funders are looking at who are you working with and who else is giving you money. So at that early stage, just sharing other external opportunities is how we support you in this early phase.
Can we deep dive a little bit more?
Mm-hmm.
So let's just talk about these things that we are able to offer for you in a little deeper sense. So when we talk about basic consultation and guidance, you have a team of 9 people at the Community Foundation. Most of us have run our own nonprofits in the past. Most of us have, backgrounds in either nonprofit management, fundraising, right? There's a really great skill set here at the Community Foundation. And sometimes we can just offer some casual conversation, happy to go have a cup of coffee, talk about things you might consider. But also, we know where to find resources. So the example I like to give, and I don't want to freak anybody in the room out yet, I'm going to freak out later. So there's something called the Michigan License to Solicit. Oh my gosh, I see heads nodding. Thank you, yay. Many people don't know what that is or if they need one. So we ask for the number on the application, and most folks, not most, many folks go. So we can't help you get that license, but we can help you figure out where to get it. And we can also give you a little bit of advice about whether or not you don't need it, right? I mean, frankly, I would ask the Attorney General if you're really not sure, but if it's really clear that you aren't going to qualify for a license, then we could probably tell you that, right? We can help you with that. So that's the kind of guidance, right? We can't, really consult with you individually on your own nonprofit and how to do all these things, right? That's not sort of our role, but we certainly are a great resource of information for sure. And I want to talk just a little bit, see meet and greets up here. That's something that our team started and LaToya organized and hosted last year. And those are really informal gatherings. We invite 20, 25 small organizations to come together. We have them in places around town. And it really is just a social opportunity to come and meet other nonprofits who are doing work in the community. And we've had some wonderful partnerships sort of develop. I'm going to put Geronimo on the spot because you were my first really great connection. Geronimo with Footprints of Michigan attended our first event and happened to meet somebody who runs a community center on the south side who said, yeah, we have this great event every year and we give away backpacks for kids at school and we have food and blah, blah, blah. And wouldn't it be great if we partnered with somebody who gives away shoes for kids? And right, this beautiful moment happened and I got all giddy. So we are doing those kinds of things, and all we're doing is putting people in a room together, and you're making the magic happen, right? You're telling your story and figuring out where might there be some great collaborations. So keep an eye out for those. We're going to do 4 of them next year. Am I lying? Okay, good. LaToya talked about these workshops and capacity building cohorts. We have done some of this stuff in the past, sort of one-offs, right? Like I do the occasional grant writing workshop, or during COVID, we did something on crisis fundraising. And, so we've done these sort of one-offs, but we want to be more strategic in our planning around that and really meeting organizations' needs in terms of what it is that you want to learn more about. So those might be, again, just one-off workshops. But we're also going to form some cohorts, so where there will be some peer-to-peer learning from folks, or some opportunity for folks to come together and learn in a more collaborative kind of environment. So, and we're going to talk more about that later because we want all your input because we don't know everything. And then one of the things that I would really encourage you is if you got the invitation, then you're on our nonprofit partner list. But my guess is that maybe some of you were here because somebody shared the invitation with you. And if that's the case, make sure that you give us information about your organization, who you are, contact name, and we will put you in our database as a nonprofit partner. And what that means is that when there are opportunities not associated with the community foundation, like funding opportunities, learning opportunities, we'll blast that out to our nonprofit partner list. So we did that quite a bit during COVID because there was PPP funding and ARPA funding and all these opportunities for different funding resources. And again, we're not providing the funding and we're not facilitating the application process, but we're sharing the information so you don't miss that opportunity. So if we don't know you, make sure we do, okay?
Okay, and one of the great things that you touched on too was knowing about the licensing requirements. In the early startup phase, most organizations won't qualify for a license to solicit yet. However, as you grow, you might want to think about that kind of requirement. So in the growth phase, now organizations become more consistent in their programming. The results are starting to be more measurable. This is where your funding support really increases from a wider range of funders. So you might move from family and friends to now family, friends, and applying for grants and looking for other ways of funding. You want to make sure that you're starting to look at your executive director role, making sure that you have someone steadily leading your organization, and making sure that you're now beginning to think about how you're going to divide your labor out. Because an executive director wears many hats, right?
Yeah.
Right? Can I get an amen? But it's going to lead to burnout, right? Has anyone ever felt burnout? Same. So you really want to start thinking about how you can divide that labor out. So you want to make sure that you establish a good amount of volunteers for sure, so that you can get some key people in some roles that can help you and support you in your organization. So as a leader, you're still building the culture. Now you guys are results oriented, making goals, and those volunteers are your key resource. Your branding and marketing is increasing. You probably have a website and really have some material that you can get out to the community to really make your name known and really build some partnerships with some other organizations. Board expands. Again, before we were saying it might have been your aunt, your cousin, and sister-in-law on your board. So in your growth phase, you should really be thinking about who on your board is going to support your mission and what can they bring to the organization, because you're going to need someone to help you navigate some of those licensing requirements, or if you're looking for extreme funding, federal or state funding, you definitely need someone that is pretty good at going through that paperwork and staying on top of those deadlines. So you want to make sure that you have people on your board that can really support the areas that you probably just don't know that much about, right? Because as an executive director, everyone thinks on your team that you know everything, right?
No.
No, never. Yeah.
The board doesn't.
Right, exactly. So it's really good to start looking for those people that can help you in those areas that you're not strong in. And then you want to make sure that those licensing requirements are met. So these are key people to help you get to where you want to go, especially if you're starting to fundraise a lot of money. So in this growth phase, there are a few ways that we as a community foundation can support you. Now you're more eligible and more likely to find some funding from our grant opportunities. Some of those could be for impact, which is collaborating with a couple organizations and making real strategic, sustainable change, impacting. Give me the word, Cindy.
It is about impacting the community either through delivering your services to an unmet market, or identifying a need in the community that you are uniquely situated to address. So it's about making impact in the community, which can be as part of a collaboration or as your own organization. And that grant cycle opens later in the year. That grant cycle currently isn't open, but you can watch for information about it come April.
Thank you. She says that so eloquently. Youth grants are a great opportunity for organizations that are focusing on issues that, are focused on youth, really. And those are a grant cycle that is actually funded by our youth fund, and those applications are reviewed by and discussed by kids. So that's something to keep in mind. Make sure you read all the guidelines and tips and tricks that we put up on the website, because we're not making these decisions. So just a FYI. Mini grants are something that is really a good opportunity for growth phase organizations to apply for, because those are really targeted for those smaller organizations with a operating budget of $200,000 or less. So it gives you a better opportunity for funding, because you're not really competing with those larger organizations that probably have a grant writer and have all those people in place that really stay on top of development for your organization. We have groups such as Inspired Leaders and fundraisers or fundraising roundtable. Inspired Leaders is a group of executive directors that come together and talk about things that are going on in their organization. It's just a smaller, tailored group for individuals to really talk about what's going on and help each other in various capacities, right, Cindy?
Yeah. These are peer-to-peer opportunities where you'll learn from other folks in the community who are doing work like you're doing, right? So, yeah. In the fundraisers, group fundraising roundtable, same thing. Development folks are folks whose primary role is fundraising in your organization, can be part of that group, and it is a great opportunity to come and just learn from what other folks are doing. And borrow ideas, and get great tips, right? There's a lot of not only tips for doing good development work, but it's interesting to hear people share stories about, I wouldn't use that venue, we had a problem there, or you should ask these guys because they gave us a deal. Like there's a lot of really valuable practical information that gets shared at these things. So if anybody is in that situation where you are the primary fundraiser or your title is fundraiser development director and you want to be part of that group, I am more than happy to add you to the list. Just let me know.
Yeah, and it's a great opportunity too to find out what other organizations have gone through so that, everyone has those downfalls or those pitfalls that you go through and you're like, man, I wish I had known this. It's great to have a group of people that you can really just openly talk to comfortably and learn from their mistakes, right? We also provide guidance for establishing endowments. And I'm going to let Cindy explain endowments because she is more of a pro at that than I am, but it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, so I don't know if anybody in the room is in that situation yet, but as you start into that growth phase, one of the things that you want to be thinking about is organizational sustainability, right? Because I've worked pretty closely with a local nonprofit who actually said to me one time, I started this organization and it was kind of fun and I liked it. And I was passionate about it, but it was sort of a fun thing. And then it became really successful. And now it's a thing. Like it's a real thing that I don't want to see go away. So he had two priorities. One was a succession plan, right? So that if he wasn't there someday, the organization didn't disappear. And two, conversations around building an endowment, which is a fund where the corpus amount, the amount that you invest is protected forever. And each year, spendable amounts come off of that endowment and come back to your organization. And because it lives in perpetuity, right, it is money into your organization as long as your organization is around. So it's a much more complex conversation about whether it is the right thing or the right time for you. But if anybody's interested in exploring that, we just happen to have the person in the back of the room that you can talk to. So that is Marcy Kinzer, who is the Vice President of Donor Services, and would be happy to have a conversation with you about what that looks like for an agency. But growth phase is the time, might not be the time to start it, but it sure is the time to start thinking about it, right? Because it is part of that long-term organizational sustainability.
Yes, and the key is start thinking about it, right? Because there have been organizations in our community that have said, man, if someone had thought about this, we wouldn't be in the position we are today. So definitely something to think about. Again, we offer help out with relationship building, and we do consultations. If you are having an issue in your organization, we're very open here at the Community Foundation. Like, we want you to reach out to us and talk through some situations because, again, at the end of the day, we want you all to succeed, right? That's how we build up our community. So we're often talking to one organization and saying, hey, I talked to someone else that was going through something similar, or I know someone else that would be very helpful to you in this situation. So because we're talking to people on a regular basis, when you bring an issue to us, a lot of times we can partner you with someone that is either going through that same situation or has resolved that situation or would just be a good person to work through it with. So reach out. We often do site visits for a number of reasons, but one could just be to see how your project is going. One, we'd love to see success and what that looks like, but we also want to see what it's like in progress too. So if you have something that's going on, please reach out and let us know, like, hey, come visit us. We want to see what's going on in your organization. We want to make sure that if there's anything in addition that we can do to help you out, we just need to know. So it's all about keeping that line of communication open and making sure that we are making this a partnership that is continuous and not just stagnant. And then when you are applying for grants with us, make sure you're filling out your evaluation as open and honestly as possible, because we want to know, how did it go? Did everything go smoothly? Did everything just crumble? Like, what kind of pitfalls did you go through? That actually is really good feedback for us to know. because if you're going through it, there's a likely chance someone else is going through that as well. So always just make sure that you're as open and honest and candid as you can be when you're doing those evaluations, because we do look at them. And again, we do continue to share external funding opportunities and learning and informational opportunities. Again, we'll have these cohorts that we will be looking at how we can continue to support you in various ways. So just like in the startup phase, we're trying to expand those ways that we can support you. Anything else?
No. So I think for some of you, you are not yet in the maturity phase, but you're gonna be, because we're gonna help you. But some of you are already there. And so let's talk a little bit about what that looks like. Right, at this stage, you are a fully operational, functioning organization that has robust programming. You're doing evaluation of your own work and making determinations about where change needs to happen. You're taking on larger and maybe more innovative projects, right, in the community. You have a really diverse form of funding. And I can't help myself. I'm a former fundraiser. You cannot take the fundraiser out of a person. So let me do my little sidebar soapbox. When we talk about diverse fundraising or funds, we are talking about money from multiple and varied sources, right? You're like, yeah, Cindy, I know what diverse means. But I don't think a lot of organizations do. You cannot, and I'm telling you this as a grant maker, you cannot survive on grants alone. It doesn't work. It does not work. You can't survive on special events alone. They will eat you alive. He's laughing.
No, I just had a conversation with my staff this morning about reimbursables and how the only way that we're going to be sustainable in 2024 is if we bring in some reimbursables.
So you really need to be thinking about who are those people, generous, philanthropic people in the community that live and breathe and care about your mission, right? And you have to, I know, you're all gonna say, oh, I don't like talking to people about money. You have to, right? Somebody in your organization has to make that commitment to be talking to people about the work that you do, why it matters, why it should matter to them, and how they can help you continue to function, right? You gotta have that individual giving component in there. You just do. And it's hard in the early stages, right? Because as LaToya said, sometimes all your funding is coming from your pocketbook and the occasional plea to mom or grandma or somebody who just wants you to do good work, right? And that's great, but not likely going to sustain you forever, right? I mean, unless your grandpa's Bill Gates or something, but most of you are not. So really think about, take 5 minutes someday and look at your revenue sources and then look at where they're coming from and put them in a pie chart, right? And if you are really heavy in any one of those areas, really start talking to your boards, start talking to your staff and thinking about how are we going to diversify this so that if one of these goes awry, and I'll give you a great example during COVID, our foundation and many other local funders pivoted from their typical fundraising or typical grant making to doing only support for basic needs organizations, right? We said, look, we want to help people that, organizations that are getting people food and shelter and mental health support, right? That's everything else stopped for about 4 months. I have to tell you, my friends in the arts and in the cultural organizations and the environmental organizations were not happy with me. And frankly, I don't really, but Michelle forgave me. But I don't blame them, right? It's really hard to say, well, what do you mean? I mean, nobody said, oh, people don't deserve food. They all said, look, we get it, and yet this is really hard. But luckily for many of those organizations, they had other revenue sources. But if all you were doing was grant making and that went away, ruh-roh, right? So This is really critical, I think. Leadership in your organization at this stage has really evolved beyond the the founder, right? So you have somebody who oh my goodness, who creates an organization. Let's go with that. And they live in that organization for many, many years. But at some point, right, you need that succession to take place. So at this stage, doesn't mean they're not involved anymore. They can still be involved, right? But the leadership is not about that one person, right? It's either dispersed among multiple people or it is a new hired person, right? Well, while the founder is still sort of engaged at some level. The culture of the organization is well defined, right? You're clicking along, you got great staff, you have some retention, you got a good pool of volunteers. You're pretty sophisticated in terms of your marketing. You know how to tell your story. And that is so critical, so critical. We get applications all the time, and I have reviewers that go, I can't really figure out what they do, right? Work on that elevator speech, right? Work on figuring out what are the 35, 40, 50 most important words that you want to use to explain to people the amazing things that you do. And the board is really focused on policy and strategy, which is what a governing board, not a working board, should be doing, right? And the staff is responsible for operations. So you don't go to board meetings anymore and have, somebody on the marketing committee say, I think it looks better for us if we buy blue pens, right? It's not a board's job, right? Staff runs operations, board does policy and strategy. So when you get to this stage, what are the opportunities here at the Community Foundation for all of you? Well, obviously, again, we have these grant opportunities that LaToya has already talked about. Just a reminder, our impact grants will happen in the fall. Right now, we have capacity, mini, and youth grants that are open. We're going to do these one-off workshops that we talked about, and we're also going to build some cohorts, some learning cohorts around particular topics. We have these peer groups that we talked about, and we're interested in starting maybe a couple more. So right now, we have a leadership group, and we have a fundraisers group. But we'd be interested in starting other groups as well. So if you have an idea about, maybe how you'd like to get together with some of your peer organizations, have a conversation with us because we're happy to try to pull some of those things together. We do, again, guidance for endowments, and this might be the stage where you're saying, yeah, it's time, right? We are now a fully mature organization. We sometimes have excess revenue at the end of the year. We have a fairly sophisticated fundraising program, including planned giving. And so maybe you have this fabulous check that lands in your box one day because one of your donors passed away and left you in their estate plan. And you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do with this? Well, that might be a good moment to have a conversation around starting that endowment, right? And we can offer some guidance in that arena. Again, the same kinds of things that LaToya talked about in terms of relationship building and shared opportunities that we might hear about. But this is likely the first stage that we've talked about where a capacity building grant is probably most appropriate, right? We wouldn't do a capacity building grant, most likely, in the very early startup phase. We might do one in a growth phase in the right situation, but this is where probably 75% of our capacity grants land, because this is the point in which organizations are at a level of sophistication that they can identify, we have a board governance issue. We need a strategic plan. We are finally at a place where we need to hire our first fundraiser, right? So you're at that kind of in between that growth and maturity phase where you're saying, we need some help making that leap. So this is where you might really start thinking about this capacity building grant opportunity. I think the next stage is also a really great place to think about a capacity building grant, and then I'll tell you a little bit about what that looks like. So this is the redefining stage. What what did we did a lot of research. We didn't make these up, by the way. I just want you to know. There are multiple sources in contemporary nonprofit literature that will explain anywhere from like 3 to 25 stages of a nonprofit. We tried to keep it simple for you. So we didn't make any of this up, but there was one citation that called this the dying stage or something horrible like that. Oh, it was awful. I was like, let's not use that word. So you're not really dying here. It's just you started to discover that maybe you don't have the same robust level of programming that you used to have. Maybe there's more competition in your space than there was before. Other people have started similar nonprofits and are providing similar services. So there's some duplication. Funders are maybe not renewing their commitments or not at the same level as they were before. Maybe they're getting spread a little bit thin. There's starting to be a little turnover in staffing, maybe a little less volunteer activity. So, maybe there's something going on at the leadership level. Maybe there's something going on at the board level. I mean, there could be a lot of reasons. So let's not think about this as dying. Let's think about this as an opportunity, if some of these things start to happen, to reimagine your organization, right? There's some ways that we can do that as well. Capacity building grants are great for this, right? I mean, part of how you do this work is with external support to help walk you through some planning, maybe some prioritization work, right? Some thinking about a market and what does the market look like really and what's changed in the market that maybe we need to pivot. I mean, this happened a lot. Anybody in the room, the exact same organization today that they were before COVID? Anyone at all? Yeah, didn't think so, right? So same thing here, right? Whether a crisis brought it on or just time. Sometimes you just need someone to come in and help you rethink how you're going to continue to be sustainable and relevant and to really make a difference in the community that you have been impacting all these years, right? And a capacity grant application is great for that. We can also provide some resources to help you in that redefining, so we have access to consultants and training programs and things like that we can use. And then we can potentially help connect you to other organizations for maybe collaboration that can strengthen what you're doing. Or maybe it's time to think about a merger of some kind. Can I tell you a story? So there was an organization in town called Helping Hands Respite that did amazing work for many years here in the community, but was a mature organization that was starting to have some challenges, had some staff retention issues, found it difficult to raise enough funds to do the work that they were doing. They were more or less an adult daycare facility for people with physical and cognitive disabilities. It takes special people and a lot of people to do that work well, right? And it was getting really challenging for them. And one of the conversations that they came to us, a very brave group of board members who came to us and said, we think it might be time for us to think about maybe merging with somebody else. Do you have any ideas? And so we sat and chatted with them for a little bit, tossed some names around, and ended up saying, you might want to call the folks at Forster Woods out in Williamston because they do a very similar thing. Maybe there's some synergy there. And a very brave group of board members at Forster Woods answered this cold call. By the way, they weren't looking for this opportunity. It just landed in their lap. And a very brave group of board members said, well, yeah, let's talk with them and see. And 2 years later, I just went to the celebration that they had of the merging of these two organizations. Helping Hands is now dissolved. Both locations are now Forster Woods. And people are continuing to get served in both communities. Now there's one strong organization that's meeting an amazing need in the community. So I know it's an awful conversation to have, to think about merging, to think about dissolving your organization. But just know that we are here to help you think about that if you ever get to that point, and maybe help make some connections for that to happen. So there are the occasional really happy endings to this conversation. So, okay. So let's talk about capacity building applications for a quick second, and then Tracy is going to show you how to actually get in and do that. So the first thing I would encourage you to do is to watch for the email that comes with this life cycle chart on it, and really, truly, honestly think about where you are as an organization on this chart. And if you feel like you are in a stage and in a place where you want to try a capacity building application, then the first step is to schedule a meeting with me. We'll have a consultation call, it's a Zoom meeting, and we will do a deep dive into what the capacity building issue that you have identified in your organization and how you see us being able to help support that in some way. Okay, so that's the first step. And I asked tough questions, I'm just gonna be honest with you, right? Because it is not, it is competitive. These grants are competitive. So I wanna make sure that I'm really understanding what you're trying to do. I'm giving you tips on how to be competitive in that process, so you have the best chance if that's the right fit for you, okay? But remember, there are other capacity building opportunities that we are going to have available in terms of learning and helping to grow as an organization. So if you don't get the capacity grant, right, there's other things you can take advantage of. So once we have that consultation visit and we both agree, yep, I think this might be a good fit, we're going to give it a try and see what happens. It is an online application in our grant portal. And as I said when we first began, you do not want me explaining that to you. So, me to where I have to go. So Tracy's going to show you how to log in and get to our application and what it is you need to do if you have not applied to us for a grant in the last 2 years. In the last year, maybe. Here's the thing, we have a brand new grant portal. So even if you applied for a grant 3 years ago, it's a whole new portal. So you have to re-register and all that stuff. And she will explain all of that to you now.
Okay. Awesome. So I'm just going to direct us right now to our website. And because ourcommunity.org is our main website, and right at the top is a banner telling you how to get to our grants. So that is where I'm going now. And this landing page does have a lot of information on it. Please read it. I know it's a lot, but it does give you, it's really slow down here today. So it usually pops right up. There's Cindy. There's a lot of information, and there's a lot of links for you to click and learn more about each of these different types. And we have guidelines that are helpful for you as well. So there's a document that you can look at that kind of goes through a lot of the same information, but it's kind of a document you can download and keep handy as you're applying. So I'm not going to open that, but I will show you the different types of grants. We're talking about capacity today, so I'm going to go straight to that page. And this application is open now until February 14th. And the committee will meet sometime in late February, and you'll be notified, pardon? Early March. So you will be notified pretty soon after that takes place as to what the committee said about your capacity grant application. So we've gone through all the different types of capacity work that we do, but you just get to the portal by clicking at the bottom of each of these pages. There's also a sample application you can download if you want to take a look at that and just kind of prepare your information ahead of time. This is not what you turn in, but it does give you a chance to understand what we'll be asking you, all the information. We do ask for a lot of demographic information. And let me go back to the portal. So here we go. Our portal is called Go Apply. And clearly it is very quick. I think the internet's pretty slow down here today. So if you've not yet used our Go Apply portal, which would have only been last year, it's the first time we've ever used it, you'll need to create a new account. And if your organization has already used Go Apply, but you have not, the best thing to do is for you to create your own account and link it to your organization by tax ID number. So I'm going to this is like a fake entity that I've created with my personal email address. So I'll just show you what it looks like. I'm always available if you have questions. Please email me or call me. Please don't wait till the grant deadline to do that because you'll probably not get a hold of me that day. It's a little bit crazy at the end of our grant cycle. Wow, this is very slow. So as a grant applicant, you won't see all of these tabs across the top, but you will see one called Opportunities, and that's where all of our grants are listed. When you first register and Go Apply, it should be an automatic approval process. You should be able to just go right in after you've received the email saying that you've been approved. But if you have any issues with your registration, just let me know. I'm happy to help. So let's go ahead and open the capacity application just as a quick sneak peek. The landing page here just gives you some instructions, things that you need to know, but then to actually get into the application, you need to click Begin Application. Very simple. Again, don't forget to make your consultation with Cindy first. That has to happen before you actually submit. You can kind of go in here and look around and start filling things in if you'd like, but we ask that you do that before you submit. So I'm going to ask everyone who's going to get into our system to go ahead and click I need to fix my organization information, because we've added a lot of questions on our organization profile that we are trying to collect all of our demographic data that used to be on each of our applications. So it makes the application quicker, but we do ask you to do this one time just so we have all the information that we would like to gather about our nonprofit partners. So it's going to ask you some information about your license number that we talked about, your budget, and then a bunch of demographic information, okay? And it will populate what our database already has for you. If you're brand new, it won't show that. But if you've been in our system before, if you're in our database at all, it will populate some of the data that we already have for you. So then you just click submit. Any changes you want to make, you click submit at the end, and then that will update our database immediately. And it didn't like what I did for some reason. Maybe I missed a field. So, it's submitting. It takes a while. Slow down here, sorry. Anyway, then you can go ahead and continue to your submission, to your application draft that you're starting. Anytime you open an application, and right now we're just viewing this, but it actually has created a draft. The minute you view it, it creates a draft, and that will be always in your In Progress tab up here. So that's where you see all the drafts. Try not to make multiple drafts and get confused as to which one. You can always go in and delete any of your drafts if you want to. I'll show you what that looks like. You just click the little trash can. If you have multiple drafts, just delete them. And anytime you go into the one, again, it will start a new draft. So do be careful of that. So I'm going to show you what the actual application looks like really quick. It's not very difficult at all, but especially for capacity, it's relatively brief, but we do give you a lot of space in the narrative to explain what you want to work on with your capacity work. So basically, we just need to know who's the contact person. Are you using a fiscal agent? If your agency does not yet have its own 501c3, you'll be using a fiscal agent of some sort to accept the funds on your behalf. And that's where you would put that information. We just ask you to give 2,500 characters. That includes spaces, which people think it's words, it's spaces. So it's only characters and spaces, but it's a nice chunk of room for you to be able to write all the information you would like. And also who will be working on it with you. That's the other question we ask you in this application. We also ask for you to submit a letter from your board chair agreeing that, yes, we as an organization want to pursue this capacity work. That's our way of knowing that your board is on board with this process. And that's just a letter you can upload right at this area. We also want to see your most recent profit and loss and your annual operating budget. And there's another spot for you to upload anything else that you think might be helpful. What do we want for that? Videos or anything, or just,
No.
I don't remember what the optional uploads were for, but there's some space for you to add other things. Yes, ma'am.
Thanks for the profit and loss or not hurting the budget. Do you want like the year to date or the prior fiscal year completed?
We want, so the budget, we want the current operating budget for the year that we're in.
Okay.
And then the P&L actually should match that, right? So even if it's a partial budget or a partial, if you're partway through your fiscal year, then just submit the partial P&L.
Okay.
Does that make sense? And then basically you submit and that's it. And it will give you an email. You can submit and it will show you, I'm not going to do it now because I haven't filled anything in. It won't let me submit, but once you do, it will give you a little message saying it's submitting, please wait, and then you'll get an email confirming that it was actually received. Because in the past, we had a few issues with submission errors happening, and usually that's because somebody missed a field or something like that. But if you run into, you've submitted, you swear that you submitted it, but you did not get that email, then please contact me because we can figure out what happened. I can always get into it from the backside. But don't wait till the last minute. Please don't wait till the last minute. Is there anything else about the application?
So we want to save lots of time for questions and answers. But before I do that, I'm going to offer Cindy's free tips because, of course, I have one. So here's 3 tips for your capacity building application. Number 1, when we ask for a letter of support from the board, what we're looking for is an actual letter of support from your board chair that says, yes, we believe in this work and we are committed to doing this work. Not, the board has met and approves the application that's being submitted, right? An actual letter that shows our review committee that your board is ready for the hard work. Because as I said at the very beginning, capacity building work, not easy. Some of you have had capacity grants from us. I would venture all of you would say, it takes a lot of time, it takes staff time, it takes board time, right? It takes time. So make sure your board understands that. So first tip, board letter. You know, we all have our pet peeves. And I don't decide on grants, but I will tell you that is one of mine. I can't stand a bad board letter. So tip number 1, work on that. Number 2, we ask, as Tracy pointed out, 2 questions, right? Simplest application you'll ever fill out. Not really, because 2 questions are 2 hard questions. And the first question is, what is the capacity issue that you want to work on? And you think, well, how hard can that be? Well, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised at how hard it is to really articulate what it is your organization wants to do. So give some thought to that, right? 2,500 rambling characters will get the committee to go, I don't know what they really want to do, so we're not going to do anything, right? You end up in the no pile. So make sure that you are really articulating what that capacity issue is that you have and that you want to work on in partnership with us, because we call ourselves a partner. We want to be more than just the person who's writing the check. Okay? The other thing is, and I get this question, so I'll beat you all to it. Where do I put how much money we want? Where do I put the consultant we want to hire? Right? You don't. Those aren't questions on the application. Money is not the conversation piece on the front end. Conversation piece on the front end is, what is the work you want to do? Then let's sit down, if the committee approves it, and talk about how we're going to do this work and how much of that work we can afford to take care of for you, right? So you might want to do A through Z, and we're only able to fund A, B, and C. But we'll have that conversation, not before you're approved, but after you're approved. And the rationale for that is that you really need to commit to this work. It's right, and it may be more than just what we do with you, and likely will be. So you really want to be thinking about this globally, and then we come in as one of what might be a few different partners for you over the life of this work in your organization. okay? And I will just double down, we'll call this 3.1, on Tracy's comment. And I'm sure nobody in this room would do this. But just between me and all my new friends here, it happens. People will call the day before and say, yeah, I'm gonna do a capacity application and I saw here I'm supposed to talk to you first, so what do you want to, I need to fill that out. 24 hours, folks, first of all, and this will shock you, I do other things besides wait around for you all to call me on the phone. So you may or may not be able to make that work, right? And I always offer to people, as you start writing your narrative, if you want me to take a look at it, give you some feedback, happy to do that. But not if you send it to me the day before it's due. Which I think seems fair, right? Okay. So happy, especially if you're kind of new to this, or if you're still freaked out by the application. Every year I get at least one person going, I don't get it. Like, this is weird. It's different. So feel free to call and, as you're working on it. Okay, am I done with my tips? I have about 100 more, but I'll stop there. Okay, so we want to open it up to Q&A, and the whole team's here. Oh boy, here we go. Yes, we're back.
Okay, so I'm assuming that it's not just me. I'm assuming some of us have applied for the community center grant for the ARPA funds. Now they keep delaying the award. I am concerned that, so I don't know how you would want us to do this if we're getting to January and they delay it to February, because I can tell you where we will be in our capacity building process very much is dependent on that. So how would you want us to write the grant if we're still waiting on that?
Well, what I would say is, if there is a piece of that work that you want to carve out and approach the community foundation about funding, then I would do that. If all of the work is potentially funded by the community, okay, then I would carve out the work that you want to do. Because as I said, right, we're not going to fund all of it anyway, and there's going to be more, whether it's with the community center grant or potentially other funders, because it sounds like you have a plan for capacity building work.
Well, yeah, my question is more like, for example, if I get $2.5 million, I don't need to do a feasibility study at that point. But like if I don't get that money, I will need to do a feasibility study. So that's where I'm like,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Decisions aren't going to get made by the committee until like early to mid-March. If you get awarded a grant and you don't need it, then you just don't take it. Or if you know before it gets submitted, I mean, it'll have to be submitted by the 15th of February, but nothing's going to be going to committee and finalized until mid-March. So you have a little bit of wiggle room. 14. Sorry, 14.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so if we are, one of the organizations I work with is a state-based organization, but it's housed here in Ingham County. The work all has to happen in one of the 3 counties of interest.
Yes, so the specific guideline is this. Your organization must predominantly serve the residents of Ingham, Eaton, or Clinton County. So we have a lot of state-based organizations here because we're the capital, but if you're working statewide, it doesn't qualify. Yes?
What if you could narrow the project just to be here? So for like my organization, right, we could do something around training that could only benefit the schools that are served directly by us in these counties.
Yeah, there are potentially unique situations where that could happen. I will say we rarely, I mean, impact grants, sometimes you can narrow, a statewide organization can narrow a project, right? Because we're gonna build a building here in Lansing just to serve Lansing people or whatever the project is. We rarely do capacity building grants with statewide organizations because it's hard to say, we're going to do board governance work, but we're only going to let them make decisions about Lansing, right? It's hard to segregate those things. But if it is specific to training local people who will be working with local people, you might be able to make a case to that. And we can dive into that a little bit.
Because that's what I'm
In the consult, yeah. So in answer to your question, again, if it was, I don't know which organization you're talking about, but if it was something that you could convince the committee would stay, the benefit would stay local. But it's harder with capacity building. I mean, we had a statewide agency that wanted us to do fundraising planning for them. And I understood their need. The problem is I'm only going to pay for the dollars that are going to stay, right? It's hard to do. So, other questions? Yes.
Are you the only community foundation in the state, or does each community have a community foundation?
There are, I don't know, I think it's 75, 78. So we are not the only community foundation. There's community foundations all over the state of Michigan. Their geography varies. So some are countywide, some are the Community Foundation of Southeast Michigan, is I think 11 counties. There's the Grand Rapids Area Community Foundation, which is just the city of Grand Rapids. So everyone has a geography. So depending on where you want to be working, you could look up the Community Foundation for that area. But they all are going to have geographic restrictions. That's how we're structured.
Do they ever work together?
On statewide issues, sometimes there was a statewide coalition of community foundations around the Afghan refugee crisis when all the Afghan folks were coming into the state. So most of the sanctuary cities, formed a coalition around that issue, but not on a regular sort of basis. Yeah. Yes.
Is there any minimum requirement, like we have to be at the growth phase or maturity phase or something, or can an organization at the startup phase apply for this?
Yeah, so we don't restrict it by phase, right? But as I said, it's pretty unlikely that somebody in that startup phase is going to be approved for a capacity grant because, as silly as it sounds, you need capacity in your organization to do capacity building. And that capacity is often a person, a staff person, who is helping to drive all of this work, right? Because what a capacity grant almost always covers is either a consultant coming into your organization and working with you, or a trainer coming in and working with you, or sending your staff to some sort of a training, right? And when it's an all-volunteer organization, I mean, I'm not telling you who, but we have one right now that's very challenging because we broke our own sort of unwritten rule and funded an all-volunteer organization that's been around a long time and is very successful. And yet the consultant does not have one point person to help facilitate all the things a consultant needs when she comes to work in your organization. And it's been challenging. So I would say we could talk about it in the consultation. It would depend, I think, primarily on the level of work that you want to have done in capacity building, and whether or not there might be another offering that we have that could provide that. So, we can have that one-on-one conversation about what that is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm with Lance Regional Sister Cities, and we are into trying to do the endowment.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, to what extent would you provide feedback if we were to complete the grant application, have it ready for you to review it, let's say the last of January? To what extent would you give us some feedback on what we've done with our grant application?
Okay, so separate from the endowment, that there's not.
Well, we're doing the capacity building application.
Yep.
I want to complete that by the end of January.
Right.
You said you would provide feedback.
Yeah.
So my question is, to what extent would you provide feedback with a grant that we've already completed?
Yeah.
That we've completed.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. If you want to write the narrative, I'm not going to review it after you submit it. Once it's submitted.
Right, this is before submitting.
Right. But if you want to send me the narrative that you've written and say, what do you think?
Okay.
The extent of what I will provide is pretty darn candid.
Okay,
I'll tell you, this is never gonna work,
okay,
or I'll tell you, this is fine, but we're not gonna fund this.
okay.
So
Do
shift
some
this.
more work, so do some more work.
Right,
Uh-huh.
oh yeah, no, that is the kind of feedback.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Yes.
So just to make sure I understand correctly, so we do have one program that runs out of Marshall County. So then would I call Marshall Community Foundation to see if they would be able to fund the program or if there were any grant opportunities there?
Yeah,
There you go.
yeah, I think it is. I think it's the Berry County
Berry County.
Community Foundation there.
Is Marshall there?
Yeah, I think so. Isn't it Berry County?
Well, it's actually Albion and it's Marshall Public Schools,
Okay.
so it'd be Calhoun.
It's
County.
Calhoun. Thank you.
Battle Creek, maybe Battle
Maybe
Creek
Battle
Community-
Creek Community Foundation.
Battle Creek Community, okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Sorry, I clearly don't know my geography.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So, although our organization is in a different county, because we're serving a school in their county, would that make us eligible?
Yeah, every community foundation is gonna have slightly different rules about that. We would allow you to apply here if it was the other way around, but you'll have to check with them. Yeah, it's that old thing, you know, if you've seen one community foundation, you've seen one community foundation. They're all just a little different, so. Any final questions? Okay, LaToya has a really quick announcement before you dash out.
And I also do,
Okay.
has to do with the grant portal.
So again, capacity building grant application, when you're applying for it, just remember it is very intensive and, you know, it does require a lot of work to do that. So we have been thinking about these cohorts, and smaller capacity building type opportunities. So if you look at the end of your tables, either behind you or in front of you, you'll see some stands that have like a QR code. We want your impact of what need do you want to meet for your capacity. So if it's something around, you know, developing your board members, or if you need help understanding your financial, your operating budgets, marketing, a plethora of issues around capacity. We want to know what exactly is your most pressing need, and we're kind of thinking about how can we as a community foundation, you know, serve more organizations and build cohorts around those needs. So it's futuristic ideas, so we just want to get your input, because just like we ask on many of our applications, how do you seek input from those you serve? That's what we're doing. So if you don't mind, please, before you leave, make sure you scan the QR code and fill that out. It's just a couple simple questions. And also on your tables, please make sure you sign off on your photo. So, because there were photos taken, so just put yes or no next to your name.
If you did not check your information on this sheet yet, please find it. There's one on every table at least. We just want to make sure we got the right information for everybody. And one last thing, when the question came up about the grant applications being submitted or not, I think that was Maxine. You can save a draft repeatedly while you're in there. You don't have to do it all in one go. So you can start filling it out. You can navigate back to one of the pages and save it, and then submit at the very end. So I wanted to make sure you knew that I didn't tell that.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you all. If you have any questions, you know where to find us.
That's okay. That's fine.